You're listening to Glad Tidings. Glad Tidings is a Baha'i program sponsored by the Australian Baha'i community. The Baha'i faith began in 1844, bringing a new set of divine teachings, including peace, unity, and service to humanity. These teachings, bestowed to us by the founders of the Baha'i faith, assist communities to work together to bring peace to the world, thus realizing an ever-advancing civilization. This program is dedicated to those efforts, which contains music,
oh God, guide me, protect, red broken roof tiles,
interviews,
because, you know, sometimes you just want a hug from your parents.
Yeah, especially your mum.
Yeah.
But mommy hug.
We all were in
so
that
many
series.
changes in different aspects of our life that we really haven't been able to catch up with them and adjust to all these changes.
Norm for marriage and many other things, so people start making their own norms.
readings,
Beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there is harmony in the house,
to
there
those
will
who
be order in
asked,
the-
he hath given to drink from the cup of guidance that brimmeth. News and announcements. We welcome you to Glad Tidings.
Good evening, dear listeners. My name is Masood.
And I'm Lynette.
We are here on the topic of education.
So, today we're going to look at the topic of education, but before we do that, let's start with a prayer. My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all-bountiful, the overflowing showers of whose mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendours of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy hath bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit hath circled, we beseech thee, entreating thine ancient grace, and seeking thy present favour, that thou mayest have mercy upon all who are the manifestations of the world of being, and deny them not the outpourings of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful. So that was a prayer from Baha'u'llah.
Baha'u'llah. Thank you, Lynette, for saying the prayer.
So today's topic on education, you might be wondering, you might have some questions in your own mind, and I'll just tell you some of my questions.
Sure.
I was thinking, we have a lot of cultural assumptions about education. What are they? Is institutionalized education always the best way to go? What will education be like in the future? Is it going to stay the same? What are the most important elements of education? And what is the role of the teacher? So those were just some of the questions that I had.
Very good
I
questions.
wonder what our listeners are thinking.
Yep.
But I'd like to start by looking at what Baha'u'llah, who is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, has said about education. And this dates back to when he first began his revelation or ministry, as you might call it, back in the early 19th century. Sorry, my centuries are getting mixed up there.
That's all right.
Well, this is what Baha'u'llah says about education. The prophets and messengers of God have been sent down for the sole purpose of guiding mankind to the straight path of truth. The purpose underlying their revelation hath been to educate all men, that they may at the hour of death ascend in the utmost purity and sanctity and with absolute detachment to the throne of the Most High. So that's one purpose of the prophets and messengers of God coming and revealing themselves to humanity, is to educate them so that they may reach this state of purity and sanctity. But I wonder if there's another side to it as well. Actually, there is. This is what Baha'u'llah says. He says, man is the supreme talisman. Now, talisman is something that attracts forces. It's like a magnetic force. So man is the supreme talisman. Lack of a proper education hath, however, deprived him of what he doth inherently possess. So without an education, you can't reach that state of sanctity and purity. He goes on to say, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. So it sounds like what he's saying is that in our raw state, we're nothing. But because we've been invested with all these gems of inestimable value, what's going to help us make those gems shine is education.
Yes.
And it's interesting that he says that education will enable mankind to benefit from these gems. Don't you think that's interesting?
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So...
and the analogy of gems, I suppose you could say, we are rough diamonds.
We're diamonds in the rough,
And
yes.
we're diamonds in the rough, sorry. And I guess it's polishing, education is polishing and bringing that shine.
Exactly. So I wonder what kind of benefits Baha'u'llah is talking about when he says, that mankind will benefit from these gems or this education. So he says, bend your minds and wills to the education of the peoples and kindreds of the earth, that haply the dissensions that divide it may, through the power of the most great name, be blotted out from its face, and all mankind become the upholders of one order and the inhabitants of one city. So he's saying that education will help us achieve peace and unity and harmony, and help all those dissensions and wars and conflicts disappear. So I wonder what kind of education is going to help us to do this, because I think that we've had education for a while and we've still got conflicts.
Of one form or another,
yes. I mean, it's always changing.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting that, we need to look at the kind of education that is going to accomplish this. So here's a quote, and I'll just go to the next one. It says, knowledge is as wings to a man's life and a ladder for his ascent. Its acquisition is incumbent upon everyone. The knowledge of such sciences, however, should be acquired as can profit the peoples of the earth, and not those which begin with words and end with words. So do you think that's saying something about not knowledge for knowledge's sake?
Yeah, not knowledge. It needs to benefit mankind.
It does need to benefit the earth.
Which I think everybody's coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
If it benefits us everybody, then it benefits you and your future descendants.
That's right. Yeah. But it does seem to indicate that the kind of education that we have at the moment, particularly some kinds of university education, may be a little bit redundant in a way or not so useful. I'm not saying that all university education is like that, but it depends what branch of knowledge you're studying. But some may not be as beneficial as others.
It's hard to put it in one basket.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There are some parts of university which are very useful for industry, for example, but not so useful for theorizing and doing academic work. Yeah,
so if it's purely academic,
some are very good for academic and basic research, not so good for industry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it needs to have some benefit. And so I find that quite interesting that knowledge just for knowledge's sake is considered to be not useful anyway. And Baha'u'llah goes on to say, the purpose of learning should be the promotion of the welfare of the people. and that the learned of the day must direct the people to acquire those branches of knowledge which are of use, that both the learned themselves and the generality of mankind may derive benefits therefrom. Such academic pursuits as begin and end in words alone have never been and will never be of any worth. So that's pretty strong language, I think,
Can you read that again?
Yep. So it says, the learned of the day must direct the people to acquire those branches of knowledge which are of use, that both the learned themselves and the generality of mankind may derive benefits therefrom. Such academic pursuits as begin and end in words alone have never been and will never be of any worth. Now, even though Baha'u'llah was speaking at the time when many of the learned in Persia were devoted to the study of philosophy, and so I think he was speaking mainly in that context. But even today we have people who are, the context of their study does not seem to be of direct benefit to human beings. So I think that education in the future, this is my opinion, will be more inclined towards what benefit is this in general.
Yep.
And to finish off this particular section, it seems that in general, the acquisition of knowledge and wisdom are highly regarded in the Baha'i writings, in the Baha'i faith, and by the founder of the faith himself. And this is another quote that he says, "The man of consummate learning and the sage endowed with penetrating wisdom are the two eyes to the body of mankind. God willing, the earth shall never be deprived of these two greatest gifts." So the man and the woman, of course,
Yes.
that's understood,
Yep.
of consummate learning and the sage endowed with penetrating wisdom are the two eyes to the body of mankind. So God willing, we will never be without them, because without knowledge, without learning, without wisdom, without the ability to put that knowledge into practice, that's the end of civilization. So
We continuously learn, don't we?
yes, we're always
So
learning.
It never stops.
We never stop. Yeah. So hopefully we will be those two kinds of people. Masood, you can be the man of consummate learning, and I'll be the sage endowed with penetrating wisdom.
Well, I'll try anyway.
So that's all from the writings of Baha'u'llah himself. And I think, in many cases, the writings of Baha'u'llah are, give us a lot of understanding and knowledge about where we are today. And this has never been done in past dispensations, that we have the actual words of the Prophet. It's always been hearsay.
Yep.
Somebody else has written it down. But today we have the direct word from the Prophet's mouth, so to speak.
Which book is that from?
So this is a compilation, and it's a compilation of extracts from the Baha'i writings. It's just called Baha'i Education.
Yep.
And, the Baha'i World Centre, or the Baha'i Publishing Trusts around the world, have lots of these compilations on many different topics. They have it on the equality of men and women, they have it on environment, they have it on almost every conceivable topic you can think of.
Yep.
So it's easy. You want to know something that the Baha'i writings talk about, you just have to look for one of these compilations.
Yep.
We'll be reading a few more from these
absolutely.
other segments.
Sure.
Now, there are different types of education that we talk about, Masood, and this is what it says or this is what Abdulbaha says. He says, education is of three kinds: material, human, and spiritual. Material education is concerned with the progress and development of the body through gaining its sustenance, its material comfort and ease. This education is common to animals and man. Did you know that? Material education. I don't know. I suppose that's to do with growth and development, and basically it aids us in reaching maturity.
I guess
or
so.
health and maturity.
So I guess physical health. And, would that also include mental health as well?
I don't know. Does a cow have mental health? I suppose it does if it's got enough grass to chew.
Yeah, enough grass to chew. They're happy. They have enough water.
Yeah, okay. And then he goes on to say that human education signifies civilization and progress. That is to say, government, administration, charitable works, trades, arts and handicrafts, sciences, great inventions and discoveries, and elaborate institutions, which are the activities essential to man as distinguished from the animal. So human education is what we commonly think of as the education that we receive.
Yep. So these are the professions and the arts, like Abdulbaha mentioned.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously animals don't do that. They don't have schools of learning. This is...
Well, dogs do, but that's another story.
That's obedience school, yeah. So anything that signifies civilization and progress.
Yep.
So this to me really implies that without education, we won't have an advance in civilization. Without human education, it won't happen. And then the third kind of education, what do you think that is?
Spiritual
education, yeah.
That's what Abdulbaha mentions.
Yeah, he said spiritual education. So he says, and he calls it here divine education. And he says divine education is that of the kingdom of God. It consists in acquiring divine perfections. And this is true education, for in this state man becomes the focus of divine blessings, the manifestation of the words, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." This is the goal of the world of humanity. So the goal of the world of humanity is to be as the image of God. So to acquire all those divine perfections. Now, the question arises then, who is to provide the human education? Who does that? Abdul-Baha says, and among the teachings of Baha'u'llah is the promotion of education. Every child must be instructed in sciences as much as is necessary. If the parents are able to provide the expenses of this education, it is all right. Otherwise, the community must provide the means for the teaching of that child. So I thought that was quite interesting that, somebody has to provide it. So if the parents can provide it, all well and good. If not, the community should do it. And and I thought that was interesting because in many communities it doesn't happen. Children are not educated. They don't receive primary instruction. And I was reading in a little pamphlet put out by the Baha'i International Community some years ago, and it had some statistics about literacy in Iran, and I can't find it just now. But it said that from its origins in 19th century Iran, the Baha'i community has gradually established itself around the world. And it says that there are a lot of grassroots projects that are held. Many of them do focus on education. I know that there are schools in South America, there are schools in India that provide literacy training as well as vocational training, making sure that girls receive education as well as boys. And I can't actually find this piece of information.
It would be interesting to find out what the actual illiteracy rate is across the world.
It's interesting because in Iran, where a lot of Baha'is are not able to receive an education because they are not considered to be on the same level as other human beings. Yeah. Here it is, I found it actually. It says that it represents many of the sectors of the population, the Baha'i community, from the lowest social strata to the highest. And it says that literacy among adult Baha'is under the age of 40 had reached 100% as early as 1973, as against a national literacy rate of 15%.
Oh.
That is, to me, that's really incredible. Mm-hmm. And so it's an evidence of the quality of education that the Baha'i community was ensuring that their members were receiving because they weren't able to get it through government channels. Yep. So there you go. It's possible. Now, I thought that we would look at what age groups this education, this human and spiritual education encompasses. And in 2010, the Universal House of Justice said in their annual message to the Baha'is that from one perspective, an educational process with 3 distinct stages appears in sharp relief. The first for the youngest members of the community through children's classes, the second for those in the challenging transitional years, and we call those junior youth groups, and the third for youth and adults in what we call study circles. In this context, they go on to say, one speaks of 3 educational imperatives, each distinguished by its own methods and materials, each claiming a share of resources, and each served by mechanisms to systematize experience and to generate knowledge based on insights gained in the field. And that last part there is really interesting to me because it says that it implies that it's not a static kind of education,
yes, it's
that it is based on experience.
Yep. Yeah.
So
and
whatever...
it's growing organically.
Yes.
So those who gain the experience, give the, help others to grow and
right.
educate.
Yeah.
And they learn at the same time, and it grows and grows and grows organically.
Yeah, that's right. So, we have a few terms that we consistently use in Baha'i communities. One is organic growth.
Organic growth, yeah.
One is having a humble posture of learning.
Yep.
Another one is the 3 aspects of what we do, which is consultation, action, reflection. So it's, you're always learning. So you never stay in one place in the educational spectrum.
Yep.
You're always putting things into practice, and you base what you do next upon what you've learned before. So I think that is what when they speak about systematizing the learning process, this is what it is. So it's based on consultation, action, and reflection, which I think is a really good model for the future of education.
Yes.
And
and to some extent that happens, I guess, in the schools as well.
I think that from what I know, very little I know of the education system in Australia because I've been away for a long time. Yeah. But I have got a sister-in-law who's a teacher, and they're always doing professional developments in the schools, and they're always putting into practice new learnings. And some of them are very, very exciting because they're very inclusive. They try to include children with different learning styles, learning capabilities, and mentoring, peer mentoring, and so on. And so I think, teachers really have a high station in the Baha'i faith, as well as, through human education as well as spiritual education.
Yeah. I mean, teachers have a good, I think they've got a good grasp of their teaching methods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they don't just rest on their laurels. They're consistently being challenged, and I take my hat off to them because I'm no longer a teacher. I used to teach English, but I think that when any of us think about people who have shaped the way we think, we usually do think about a teacher. Now, I actually really would like to read this quotation because it's quite important, because when we're talking about education, we're talking about investigation of truth as well. And Abdulbaha has said this in a document called The Promulgation of Universal Peace. He says, "All blessings are divine in origin, but none can be compared with this power of intellectual investigation and research, which is an eternal gift producing fruits of unending delight. Man is ever partaking of these fruits. All other blessings are temporary. This is an everlasting possession. Even sovereignty has its limitations and overthrow. This is a kingship and dominion which none may usurp or destroy. Briefly, it is an eternal blessing and divine bestowal, the supreme gift of God to man. Therefore, you should put forward your most earnest efforts towards the acquisition of science and arts. The greater your attainment, the higher your standard in the divine purpose. The man of science is perceiving and endowed with vision, whereas he who is ignorant and neglectful of this development is blind. The investigating mind is attentive, alive. The callous and indifferent mind is deaf and dead. A scientific man is a true index and representative of humanity. For through processes of inductive reasoning and research, he is informed of all that appertains to humanity, its status, conditions, and happenings. He studies the human body politic, understands social problems, and weaves the web and texture of civilization. In fact, science may be likened to a mirror, wherein the infinite forms and images of existing things are revealed and reflected. It is the very foundation of all individual and national development. Without this basis of investigation, development is impossible. Therefore, seek with diligent endeavour the knowledge and attainment of all that lies within the power of this wonderful bestowal. So we should not take that lightly, because investigation of the truth is one of the most important things that we can do.
Yeah, it's a fundamental.
You know,
yeah.
I always used to tell my children, don't believe everything you read or see, especially if it's on TV. So that about wraps it up for
almost. Yep.
Yeah,
so that's the end of our program.
Mm-hmm.
Until next week.
Peace and goodwill.
Peace and goodwill.